imagine a world where Nazi Germany unleashed the atomic bomb first. A world where Hitler, not Truman, held the power to vaporize entire cities with a single weapon. This was Oppenheimer's greatest fear, and it nearly became reality. Welcome to Deep Dive America. Today, we uncover the truth behind the deadliest race in history, the desperate sprint between America's brightest minds and Hitler's twisted science machine to control the ultimate weapon of war. By 1942, the Nazis had a 2-year head start. Their secret uranium club, led by Werner Heisenberg, was closer than anyone admitted. Meanwhile, in Los Alamos, J. Robert Oppenheimer worked in utter secrecy, haunted by one question. What if they were too late? The stakes? Not just victory or defeat, but the survival of democracy itself. This is the story of espionage, moral sacrifice, and a scientific breakthrough that could have doomed humanity, or saved it. The atomic bomb wasn't just born in a lab, it was forged in a shadow war where every second counted, and one slip would have changed history forever. The year is 1939. The world is on the edge of a scientific revolution, one that could reshape the very nature of war. Albert Einstein, the most famous physicist of his time, sits down to write a letter that will alter the course of history. His message to President Franklin D. Roosevelt is urgent and dire. Nazi Germany is exploring the terrifying potential of nuclear fission. Just months earlier, German scientists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann had achieved the unimaginable. They split the uranium atom. The discovery sent shockwaves through the global scientific community. The implications were staggering. If a chain reaction could be controlled, the energy released might be weaponized, creating a bomb of unprecedented power. Recognizing the existential threat, the Nazis acted swiftly. They launched a top-secret nuclear initiative known as the Uranium, the Uranium Club. Their mission was clear: to harness atomic energy for military dominance. And at the center of this effort stood Werner Heisenberg, one of the greatest minds of the 20th century. A Nobel Prize-winning physicist, Heisenberg was a genius who had already reshaped our understanding of quantum mechanics. But now, his brilliance was being directed toward a far darker purpose. Or was it? To this day, historians debate Heisenberg's true intentions. Some believe he was fully committed to the Nazi cause, while others argue he deliberately stalled progress, subtly sabotaging the project from within. The truth remains shrouded in mystery. But one thing was certain: Germany had the scientific talent, the industrial resources, and, most alarmingly, a head start in the race for the atomic bomb. Meanwhile, the United States was lagging behind. The Manhattan Project, America's secret atomic program, was born not out of confidence, but out of sheer desperation. By the time the U.S. fully committed to the effort in 1942, German scientists were already conducting advanced experiments with nuclear reactors. To close the gap, America turned to its brightest minds, men like Enrico Fermi, Niels Bohr, and Richard Feynman. But to lead them, the military chose J. Robert Oppenheimer, a theoretical physicist unlike any other. A man of deep intellect and poetic sensibility, Oppenheimer was as tormented by philosophy as he was driven by science. Now he was handed the most destructive task in human history: to build a weapon capable of ending the world. The remote desert town of Los Alamos, New Mexico, became the unlikely epicenter of this world-altering mission. Under Oppenheimer's direction, scientists worked around the clock, racing against an invisible enemy. The challenges were immense. The physics was unproven, the engineering unprecedented, and the pressure unbearable. Yet even as they labored in secrecy, danger lurked in the shadows. Soviet spies had infiltrated the Manhattan Project. Klaus Fuchs, a brilliant physicist and covert communist, was passing critical secrets to Moscow. Every breakthrough, every calculation was being leaked to America's wartime ally and soon-to-be rival, the Soviet Union. The world was hurtling toward a nuclear future, and the lines between friend and foe were already blurring. As the war reached its climax, Allied intelligence grew increasingly anxious. With D-Day looming, reports suggested that Nazi Germany might be closer to an atomic weapon than anyone had feared. The Allies couldn't take the risk. In response, they launched Operation Alsos, a clandestine mission to hunt down and dismantle Germany's nuclear facilities before it was too late. Teams of scientists and soldiers raced across war-torn Europe, seizing documents, interrogating physicists, and sabotaging equipment. Time was running out. A single misstep, a single overlooked clue, and Hitler could gain the ultimate weapon. Not with armies or aircraft, but with a single city-leveling explosion. The world stood on the brink. The Manhattan Project pushed forward, fueled by fear and determination. The Nazis, though faltering, could not be underestimated. And lurking in the background, the Soviets were gathering their own atomic ambitions. The race for the bomb was more than a scientific endeavor. It was a battle for survival, a test of human ingenuity and morality. And as the final days of the war approached, one question haunted every scientist, soldier, and statesman involved. What would happen when the first atomic weapon was finally unleashed upon the world? On July 16, 1945, the world changed forever in the barren deserts of New Mexico. At 5:29 a.m., the first atomic bomb, codenamed Trinity, erupted in a fireball brighter than the sun, shaking the earth with unimaginable force. J. Robert Oppenheimer, the man who had led the scientific effort to create this weapon, stood in stunned silence as the shockwave rolled over him. In that moment, the full weight of what he had unleashed struck him like a physical blow. Words from the Bhagavad Gita, the ancient Hindu scripture he had studied, rose unbidden to his lips. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. It was a whisper of horror, of realization, a prophecy of the new era that had just dawned. 3 weeks later, that prophecy became devastating reality. On August 6, 1945, the uranium bomb Little Boy detonated over Hiroshima, Japan, instantly reducing the city to ash. Tens of thousands perished in the initial blast. Thousands more would die in the agonizing weeks that followed from burns and radiation sickness. 3 days later, the plutonium bomb Fat Man obliterated Nagasaki. The human toll was catastrophic. Over 200,000 civilians dead, their lives erased in flashes of light. The bombs forced Japan's surrender, ending World War II, but at a moral cost that would haunt history. The world recoiled in horror at the images of charred ruins and radiation-scarred survivors. Yet for the United States, the message was unmistakable. Nuclear weapons worked. They had brought the war to a swift and brutal close. But victory came with a bitter truth. If America had won the war, it had not won lasting peace. The Soviet Union, having infiltrated the Manhattan Project through spies like Klaus Fuchs, had stolen the secrets of the bomb. In 1949, far sooner than expected, the USSR detonated its own atomic weapon. Joe 1, as the Americans called it, shattering the U.S. monopoly on nuclear power. The arms race had begun. What had once been a desperate wartime project now became an obsession of the Cold War. Both superpowers raced to build ever more destructive weapons, hydrogen bombs 1,000 times more powerful than the ones dropped on Japan, intercontinental missiles that could span oceans in minutes, nuclear submarines lurking unseen beneath the waves, capable of unleashing annihilation with a single order. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD, emerged as the grim logic of this new world. Peace was maintained not through diplomacy or trust, but through the certainty that any nuclear attack would trigger an equally devastating counterstrike, ensuring the annihilation of both attacker and defender. It was a balance of terror, where survival depended on the threat of total war. The Cold War became a high-stakes standoff, a game of nerves played with the lives of millions hanging in the balance. And what of Oppenheimer, the man who had set this chain of events in motion? Haunted by the consequences of his work, he turned against the very weapons he had helped create. He opposed the development of the hydrogen bomb, warning that it could lead to an even more dangerous arms race. He questioned the military's growing influence over nuclear policy. But in the fevered climate of McCarthy-era America, his dissent was seen as disloyalty. In a cruel twist of fate, the architect of the atomic bomb was branded a security risk, stripped of his clearance and publicly humiliated in a kangaroo court of a hearing. The man who had given America the ultimate weapon was now treated as a traitor. The bomb had ended World War II, but it had birthed something far more unsettling. A cold and silent war, fought not with armies but with stockpiles of warheads. A war where victory meant nothing because defeat meant everything. A war where a single misstep, a single miscommunication, could trigger the unthinkable. The end of civilization itself. The nuclear age had dawned not in hope, but in shadow. A shadow that would linger over humanity for decades to come. Today, the specter of Oppenheimer's creation looms larger than ever. 9 nations now possess nuclear weapons, some openly, some in shadow, with thousands of warheads primed for launch within minutes. While no nuclear weapon has been used in war since 1945, the threat has never dissipated. It has only evolved, becoming more complex and more dangerous with each passing decade. The world exists in a paradoxical state of nuclear peace, where the very weapons that could destroy civilization are credited with preventing global conflict. This is the uneasy balance we've lived with for generations. A balance some argue is the only reason great powers haven't gone to war again. They claim that the existential fear of mutual annihilation forces restraint, that the nightmare which haunted Oppenheimer has ironically become our shield. Look at Ukraine, they say, a nation that gave up its Soviet-era nukes only to face invasion decades later. Look at North Korea, whose nuclear program acts as both bargaining chip and impenetrable defense. Look at Iran, edging ever closer to the nuclear threshold, while neighbors watch nervously. To these observers, nuclear weapons aren't instruments of destruction, but guardians of sovereignty, the ultimate deterrent against foreign aggression. Yet others see only the fragility of this arrangement. Every nuclear test, whether in the deserts of Nevada or the mountains of North Korea, rattles the delicate equilibrium. Every treaty violation, every withdrawal from arms control agreements like the INF or New START, brings us closer to the precipice. History reminds us how often we've teetered on the edge. The 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, when nuclear war was averted by a single Soviet submarine officer refusing to launch. The 1983 false alarm when Soviet early warning systems mistakenly detected incoming American missiles, and only the gut instinct of Stanislav Petrov prevented retaliation. These near misses expose the terrifying truth that our nuclear peace hangs by threads of human judgment and imperfect technology. And now, new threats emerge. What happens when unstable leaders gain control of nuclear arsenals? When artificial intelligence systems are entrusted with launch decisions? When cyber attacks target nuclear command networks? We've constructed a world where civilization's survival depends on flawless protocols, rational actors, and infallible technology. A dangerous gamble against statistical inevitability. Oppenheimer's original fear that the Nazis would develop the bomb first now seems almost quaint compared to today's complex nuclear landscape. The greater, more enduring terror is that someone, somewhere, will use these weapons again, whether by malice, miscalculation, or machine error. As we advance into an era of hypersonic missiles, autonomous weapons, and renewed great power rivalries, the fundamental question persists. Did we create nuclear weapons to end wars? Or did we merely guarantee that the next world war will be the last? This is the paradox of the nuclear age. A technology born to save democracy now threatens all democracy. A weapon designed to secure peace may ultimately make true peace impossible. The lesson of history is clear yet unsettling. The most powerful tools humanity has ever created carry not just the capacity to protect, but the certainty that someday, unless we change course, they will fulfill Oppenheimer's darkest prophecy. This is Deep Dive America, where we confront the hard truths of our past to navigate an uncertain future.